During my 15 years of long-distance driving, I have witnessed many strange things on the highways. However, I still have evenings when I wonder if I should have contacted anyone or if there was anyone at all to call because of what transpired on I-80 through Nebraska. It was around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was traveling over the limitless expanse of Nebraska grassland, transporting refrigerated products from Denver to Chicago. With the exception of the occasional trucker checking in at truck stops or alerting drivers to speed traps, the CB radio had been silent for hours. That's when he was heard. Breaker 119. I'm Nightcrawler, and I'm searching for any eastbound businesses in this area. The older, gritty voice had that certain loneliness that comes with spending too many nights on the road. I grabbed my phone. It's Big Rig, Danny at mile marker 184 heading east. Try to be like you, Nightcrawler. All right, hello, Danny guy. Having some company is nice. How old are you? I informed him where I was and what I was carrying. Typical small conversation among truckers. He claimed to be transporting an empty flatbed on his way to Iowa to pick up farm equipment. There was nothing strange about that conversation, but his voice sounded strange, as if he was making an effort to sound normal. After 20 minutes or so, I noticed headlights in my mirror. It wasn't unusual that a large rig was approaching quickly. Drivers vary in how hard they push. However, the truck matched my speed and hung back by around 100 yards instead of passing. Instead of the contemporary LED arrays that the majority of us now use, the headlights were those vintage sealed beams. Nightcrawler, are you behind me? Then it was static for a few seconds. Danny boy, that is a bad thing. I'm still at marker 160 far back. Why are you asking? I took a look at my GPS. Mile marker 197 was where I was. The calculations were off. We were about 40 miles apart if he was at 160 and I was at 197. But someone was definitely tailing me. Just thought I spotted you back there. Must be someone else. Well, now that's interesting. Haven't seen another truck in over an hour. You sure someone's back there? I looked in my mirror again. The headlights were still there, maintaining that exact distance. I tried the CB on channel 19, asking if anyone was behind a blue Peterbilt. That's what I drive. No answer. Nightcrawler, you still copy? Oh, I copy very nicely, Danny boy. Tell me more about this mystery truck. Something about the way he said that made my skin crawl. He seemed to be enjoying this more than he ought to have, as evidenced by the eagerness in his voice. I made the decision to try something. I'll slow down and wait for him to pass. I eased off the throttle, dropping from 65 to 55. The headlights behind me slowed too, maintaining the same distance. No trucker does that. You either pass or you fall back. You don't just follow. Any luck with your shadow? Nightcrawler's voice crackled through the static. Still there, still hanging back. You know, Danny boy, sometimes the road plays tricks on you. Long nights, empty highways, mind starts seeing things that might not be there. I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just tired, imagining patterns that weren't really there. But then I noticed something else. Every time I changed lanes, even slightly, the headlights behind me changed lanes too, matching my movements exactly. How does your truck look, Nightcrawler? She's very beautiful. Classic Kenworth W900. Long nose, blue striped white cab. Real old ride. Why are you asking? I squinted into my side mirror, attempting to pick out details of the truck behind me, but the headlights were too bright. There was only a dark silhouette. Just curious. Recently I haven't seen many classic rigs. Well, I look after her really well. Spend a lot of time making sure she runs silent as a whisper. You'd be shocked how close you can get to someone without them realizing. My blood went cold. What did you say? She runs so smoothly, I added. You know, good for lengthy hauls. However, I didn't hear that. I had no doubt that he had mentioned getting close to someone. I looked at my CB radio, wondering if I was hearing things incorrectly because of interference in his voice. The 210th mile marker flashed by. Nightcrawler had told me that he should still be miles behind me. But now, maybe 50 yards behind, that truck was growing closer in my mirror. I could see more of its outline. It is unquestionably an older model, most likely from the 1980s. Are you still with me, Danny boy? Yes, I am present. You know, your comment about that truck following you has been on my mind. That's quite fascinating. I found that people are usually plotting something when they're observing you that closely. What are you saying? Oh, nothing in particular. Simply said, most people don't give a damn when driving. However, occasionally you get someone who shows a particular interest. They might enjoy your timetable, your route, or your truck. My grip on the driving wheel tightened as he drew out that final phrase. I checked my fuel indicator. About 60 miles ahead, there was still enough to reach the next significant truck stop. Perhaps I should leave. Look what transpired. Nightcrawler, have you ever had someone follow you? A long silence. Too much time. I have done my fair share of observation, but I can't claim to have done so, Danny boy. It's incredible how much can be discovered about a person simply by observing their routines, such as when they stop for gas, where they like to rest, and what time they typically go to bed. I was ill. I didn't like the direction that the talk had taken. I thought I should call someone, so I grabbed my cell phone, but there was no reception outside. That truck in my mirror and limitless dark farmland. I remarked, testing. I think I'm going to take a break at the next exit. Go out 238. That is still some time off. Only that ancient deserted rest area at mile marker 225. Been shut down for years. A truly remote location. Regarding the abandoned rest station, he was correct. I have passed it numerous times. However, how could he have known which exit I was specifically considering? Why bring up the abandoned stop too? The 220th mile sign went by. Now the headlights behind me were unquestionably closer, perhaps 30 yards. They were getting close enough to begin cleaning my mirrors. I dimmed them by flicking the switch, but it made little difference. Danny kid, you know what's funny? I've traveled this route a lot. I am familiar with every mile of it, every truck stop, every rest area, and every tiny back road that goes nowhere. If you don't know where you're going, it's quite easy to get lost out here. I am aware of my destination. Yes, you certainly do. However, plans can alter at any time. You may occasionally find yourself going in a different direction than you had planned. Twice, the truck behind me flashed its brights. That normally signifies you want to pass, according to trucker lingo. However, the left lane had plenty of space. He gave them another longer flash. Are you flashing your lights behind me, Nightcrawler? Quiet. The CB speaker hissed with static. Copy, Nightcrawler? Nothing. I tried the emergency channel, which is channel 9. Is there anyone out there? It's Big Rig. Danny at mile marker 222 on eastbound I-80. I'm in a predicament. Not moving. I could see that the truck behind me wasn't merely following now that it was close enough. It was getting into position. As I positioned myself in the middle of my lane, it also moved. It fit me just right as I veered slightly to the right. This was not an accident or a case of fatigued driving. This was intentional. 225 is the mile marker. I saw the deserted rest area in my headlights. A shadowy collection of structures tucked away from the road. As we passed it, the truck behind me slowed, as if the driver was giving it a serious inspection. The distance was then reduced to around 20 yards as it accelerated once more. My CB came alive with a crack. Are you still there, Danny boy? My CB came alive with a crack. Are you still there, Danny boy? This time the voice was closer, as if he were whispering into the microphone. You're where? I inquired. Oh, I'm exactly where I should be. I've been following your path for some time, recognizing your own patterns. Danny, you're so predictable. The stations, the timetable, everything is the same. How are you aware of my path? It wasn't difficult to determine. It's incredible how much can be learned from trucker forums, CB talk, and even those GPS if you are able to access tracking systems. The majority of drivers are unaware of their visibility. When the truck behind me flashed its lights once more, I caught a glimpse of something. Where the service road ran parallel to the interstate on the right side of the freeway. A quarter of a mile away, we could see another pair of headlights. Nightcrawler, you have a friend. Through the static came laughter. Unpleasant laughter. Perhaps. It's possible that someone else finds you intriguing. Danny boy, you have quite the reputation. Helpful on the CB at all times. Always up for a conversation with a stranger. Incredibly trustworthy. I reflected about all the talks I'd had over the years. All the private information I'd discussed with other truckers. My origins, my schedule, my residence, and my stops. Stuff that looked innocuous when you were just killing time on a desolate highway. Just ahead, the service road truck was approaching, heading to the highway intersection. When I stepped on the throttle, the truck behind me also accelerated, following closely behind. I could see it plainly now in my mirror. Like Nightcrawler had said, it was an old white cab from Kenward with blue stripes. 5 meters to the next exit is mile marker 230. I could see that the car on the service road was another truck because it was now nearly parallel to us. I was enclosed by them. What are you looking for? I inquired with the CB. Desire? Danny boy, I don't want anything. This is merely research, studying routines, paths, and weaknesses. When you know what you're doing, it's amazing how simple it is to trace someone across state boundaries. In my headlights, I saw the mile 235 exit sign. It was a tiny detour that led to a country road that vanished into agricultural area. Few witnesses, little traffic. The truck on the service road flashed its brights 3 times in response to the 3 flashes from the truck behind me. A signal of some sort. I reached for my CB phone. Listen, I have no idea what sort of game this is, but as soon as I get a signal, I'm going to call the state police. Don't hesitate, Danny boy. Tell them about the ominous truck drivers who passed you on a public road. They'll be quite intrigued, I'm sure. He was correct. What should I report? That I had a car following me. That I felt uneasy about a voice over the CB. No one had threatened me. Remained unaffected. Had not suffered any injury. But I was aware of a problem. After 15 years of driving, every sense I had developed was screaming at me. The exit was rapidly approaching. One truck was on the service road, attempting to block the on-ramp, while the other truck was still with me, one behind. As I curved down the ramp, the engine broke suddenly, and I abruptly jerked the wheel to the right and took the exit. Behind me, the truck didn't follow. It disappeared into the distance, continuing straight on the freeway. There was no sign of the truck from the service road. I was seated at the stop sign at the bottom of the ramp, trembling palms, gazing out into the darkness at the deserted rural roadway. My CB didn't say anything. I keyed the microphone a few minutes later. Copy, Nightcrawler. Nothing. I gave it another go. Big Rig Danny is here. Is there anyone out there? Another voice responded. Friendly tone, southern accent. Large Rig Cotton is here to pick up the back door, Danny. Are you all okay? A bit shaky sound. Yes, I'm all right. Hey, have you been keeping an eye on Channel 19? Has anyone heard the name Nightcrawler? No, Danny. For the past hour, this frequency has been as silent as a church. Are you sure you're all right? I checked my GPS. About 20 miles in the future, the rural highway would circle back to the interstate. Maybe I could get back to my original schedule by retracing my journey there. But I kept looking in my mirrors as I drove across the deserted farmland. Around 10 miles along that pitch-black country road, I noticed headlights coming on once more. The same cautious distance is maintained by traditional sealed beams. I was never able to determine if those trucks were indeed pursuing me or whether the entire situation was a complex coincidence involving road tiredness and an overactive imagination. But after that night, I took a different course, began taking different routes, stopping at different locations, and following varied schedules. What might have occurred if I had stayed on the road isn't what I'm most upset about. Later, while glancing over my logbook, I became aware of it. I had traveled 43 miles during the more than hour-long talk with Nightcrawler. He should have been moving away from me the entire time, though, based on what he had informed me about his location. Unless he was waiting ahead of me, or unless he was never at all behind me, or unless he was never at all behind me. When I pulled into that truck stop outside of Bakersfield, I should have followed my instincts. From the roadway, it appeared to be rather typical. Large signs promoting food and petrol. There was plenty of space for rig parking, as is customary. But as soon as I got out of my taxi, I had a bad feeling. It was a Thursday in October at 3 a.m. In an attempt to make up time after getting caught in traffic earlier, I was rushing a ton of gadgets from Los Angeles to Portland. This was the only place to stop for 30 meters in either direction, and my fuel gauge was almost empty. Limited options. It seemed strange to me that the parking lot was almost filled. This late at night, most truck stops of this size don't pack out during the week. However, there were dozens of large rigs arranged in tidy rows, the most of which their drivers likely sleeping and their running lights off. I parked close to the rear and began refueling. I became aware of the first oddity at that point. It was nearly empty in the main building, even with all those vehicles. Just one person purchasing energy drinks and a weary-looking staffer behind bulletproof glass. There aren't any drivers dining at the restaurant, looking at the truck accessories or taking showers. It felt like a ghost town inside a truck stop this crowded. I had some time to look around because the gasoline pump was operating slowly. The majority of the trucks on the lot were older models. That isn't particularly unusual. However, their uniformity was what drew my attention. They are all neat, well-kept, and have comparable changes. Upgraded lights, aftermarket bumpers, and custom exhaust stacks give the impression that they are part of a fleet, yet there are no corporate logos to be seen. As I was topping off, a man passed my truck. Middle-aged, dressed casually, as one might expect from a driver, in crisp jeans and a flannel shirt. He was not, however, approaching any of the parked trucks. He was strolling between them, examining license plates and peering inside taxis. He waved and grinned when he saw me observing, then vanished between two trailers. After filling up, I went inside to make my payment. The shopkeeper was amiable enough, but he simply shrugged when I brought up the parking lot's high volume. He commented, "All Always gets crowded this time of night, without raising his gaze from his magazine. Must be good for business. Sure is you staying the night? I felt uneasy with the way he asked, as if he was expecting a certain response. No, just a quick stop. Portland is a long way away. Then he raised his head, examining my face for a moment longer than was necessary. It's a long way to Portland. Between here and there are numerous mountain roads. If you don't know the way, it's easy to become lost. For 8 years I had been traveling by car to Portland. Had a thorough understanding of the path. However, I simply nodded and made my way to the door. As I made my way back to my truck, I saw additional people moving through the parking lot, not in the direction of the building or their own rigs, but just strolling, almost patrolling. A woman walking around the perimeter wearing a baseball cap. A man writing down license plate numbers on a clipboard. Another man observing the roadway while seated in a pickup truck with the motor running. Eager to be back on the road, I got into my cab and turned on the engine. However, a knock on my driver's side door occurred as I was shifting into gear. The person who had been strolling between trucks before was the one wearing a flannel. He yelled out, "Hey there!" through the glass. "You mind rolling down your window for a second?" I cracked it an inch, despite my instincts telling me not to. "What's up?" "Back there I saw your load securement. It appears that you may have a loose strap. I just wanted to make sure you knew before you left. An hour ago I had checked my straps." He was approaching the rear of my trailer, but they were all right. I turned off the engine and went after him. It's better to be safe than sorry. Pointing up to the strap securing my cargo there, he guided me around to the back of the trailer. "You see, it appears somewhat limp." I followed his direction. The straps were just the right amount of tight. As I turned to inform him of this, he stood closer now than before. Much nearer. I also saw that he had a tiny radio with an earpiece fastened to his belt. I answered, "Straps look fine to me," and retreated in the direction of my taxi. "You sure? You can't handle electronics too carefully. That kind of cargo is valuable. Many individuals would like to know its future direction." I was completely stopped by that. I hadn't disclosed my haul to him. They sealed the trailer. He knew even though there were no windows or signs identifying the contents. "How are you aware of my trailer's contents?" His smile fell short of his eyes. "Good luck." The majority of trucks leaving LA for the north are transporting something valuable. Automobile parts, consumer products, and electronics are all easily transportable and valuable. I was now attempting to keep a safe distance from him by withdrawing toward my cab. I had to leave. Yes, indeed. Long road to Portland, but you might want to think about going in a different direction. At night, I-5 can be perilous. There are numerous instances, accidents, trucks going missing, and robberies of drivers. The back roads are safer. Perhaps spend the night somewhere safe. I'm going to stay on the interstate. It's your call. However, there's a pleasant, peaceful location approximately 40 miles north if you decide to alter your mind. The old truck stopped, closed for many years. Very private. There, no one bothers you. I didn't respond. Simply shut the doors and got back into my taxi. I could see him talking into his radio through my windshield. Now, other people in the parking lot were staring at me as if they were waiting for a signal. After turning on the engine, I left the parking spot. However, another truck blocked the driveway before I could get to the exit. The motorist exited and began slowly inspecting his tires. I noticed a man in a plaid shirt behind me, still talking on his radio, making his way back toward the building. I waited. The vehicle obstructing the exit completed its tire check and backed off after what seemed like an eternity. I kept checking my mirrors as I turned onto the freeway. I noticed headlights pull out from the truck stop about 5 miles down the road, but no one followed right away. The feeling that I was being watched persisted for the following hour. Drivers of every truck seemed to slow down a little as they passed, peering into my cab. All of the cars behind me kept the proper distance, near enough to maintain eye contact, yet far enough away to prevent suspicion. An automobile drew up next to me at a red signal in a tiny town. "Hey, there's a CB in that rig!" the passenger exclaimed, rolling down his window. I gave a nod. "You might want to keep an eye on Channel 17. There is some useful information about the state of the roads there." He drove away as the light changed to green. I listened after changing my CB to Station 17. Voices talking about fuel, weather, and traffic. Voices talking about fuel, weather, and traffic. Costs, typical trucker chit-chat. Then, however, I began to gather bits and pieces of something else. On 5, Blue Peterbilt headed north. Verify the load. Electronic devices delivery to Portland. A different path across the mountains. Traffic is reduced. They were planning something, chatting about me. I deactivated the CB and increased my accelerator pressure. Ahead, the roadway was largely deserted save for the odd truck or car. However, I always noticed the same thing when I looked in my mirrors, headlights staying at the same separation. They changed lanes as soon as I did. They sped up as I did. I hoped to lose them, or at least have them show themselves, so I turned off at the next exit. The only businesses in the little town were a diner and a petrol station, both of which were closed at this hour. I waited while parking beneath a traffic light. The headlights I had been observing did not slow as they passed the exit. However, another car drove off the highway a minute later. Then another. Before long, 4 cars and a pickup truck were parked at different locations throughout the small town, all of which had a clear view of where I was. I turned on the engine and resumed driving on the freeway. The cars trailed after, keeping their positions akin to an escort formation. Coordinated, but not really menacing. My GPS said that there will be a rest spot in 12 miles. It was a well-lit public space with possibly other cars around. I made the decision to pause there, perhaps make a phone call, and investigate the situation. However, the rest area was closed for construction when I arrived. Orange signs told motorists to proceed to the next rest stop, which was 60 miles away, while barriers blocked the entry. The man at the gas station had cautioned me about the same 60 miles of mountain roadway. I continued to drive, but the cars that were pursuing me were becoming more daring, more visible, closer, as if they didn't give a damn if I saw them. 20 meters into the mountains, I saw what I feared. Ahead, brake lights. Traffic slowed to a crawl and then came to a total stop. Building mishap or another event. I was unable to tell. However, I was confined. One side has a big drop, a railing, and a steep mountainside. The cars that had been pursuing me approached, around my pickup in a loose circle. Doors began to open, people were leaving, and they were strolling toward me. At that moment, I saw the CB radio on Channel 19 sparking to life. The voice of a woman, professional and composed. The blue Peterbilt's driver needs to maintain composure and obey orders. Leave the keys in the ignition and get out of your car cautiously. I pick up the phone. Who is this? What are you looking for? All we want to discuss is your information, schedule, route, and goods. That's all. Nobody must suffer harm. I could see them coming through my windshield. Perhaps 8 persons traveling deliberately, without hurrying, as they had done in the past. I made a choice after glancing ahead at the traffic bottleneck and behind at the people encroaching. I put the truck in low gear and steered into the small shoulder, squeezing past the stalled cars while scraping the mountainside. My people were sprinting back to their cars, as seen in the mirrors, but it would take them some time to turn around in the traffic that was halted. I was maybe 5 minutes ahead. For 10 miles, I drove in this manner, using the shoulder and the breakdown lane in turns, until I got to a truck stop I knew well, with good security cameras and workers on duty around the clock. Under the brightest lights I could find, I parked just in front of the main building. I waited for any indication of the cars that had been after me for the next hour while I sat in my cab with the doors shut. Nothing. I eventually walked inside and asked the clerk if I might contact my dispatcher on their phone, explaining that I would be late because of some mechanical issues. Nothing occurred to my load, and I never saw those people again. Delivered it without issue to Portland the following day, but I've given that night a lot of thought. I pondered what would have occurred if I had halted when they requested it. If I had done what they said. My biggest annoyance is something I discovered later while going over my fuel receipts. That truck stop outside Bakersfield. The one with the odd individuals strolling around in all the parked vehicles. The receipt shows that I purchased petrol there at 3:17 a.m. However, my logbook indicates that I didn't get there until 3:45 a.m. Either I bought fuel somewhere that isn't shown on any map, or my watch was off. My routes have always been important to me. After 22 years of cross-country traveling, I only drive on interstates, well-traveled highways, and locations where assistance is always close by. But occasionally the route is determined by the load. And so, at 2 in the morning, I found myself traveling through Nevada on Highway 50, transporting machine parts to a mining facility outside of Ellery. They refer to it as America's most lonely road, and they're not mistaken. An empty desert for miles on end, with perhaps one car every half hour if you're lucky. It's the kind of road where you might have to wait a long time for assistance if something goes wrong. I saw her in my headlights about 40 miles east of Fallon, a woman flailing her arms while standing on the shoulder. There was only woman in what appeared to be a waitress uniform, white blouse, dark slacks, and sensible shoes, and no automobile in sight. She was obviously distressed and appeared to be in her mid-20s. I slowed down. The unwritten rule is well known to all truckers. When you can, you assist others. Running out of gas, a flat tire, and an overheated engine. Everybody has been there, but I hesitated for a reason. Perhaps it was the remote location, or the fact that she had suddenly shown up at a place where I hadn't seen a car for 20 meters. I couldn't just abandon someone stranded out there, so I pulled over anyhow. Before I had even engaged the air brakes, she rushed to my passenger door. She appeared both relieved and anxious when I rolled down the window, looking over her shoulder as if she thought someone would follow her. She said, "Oh, thank God. About 5 kilometers ago, my automobile broke down. I've spent more than an hour on foot. Are you able to transport me to the next town? What happened to your car?" I believe the radiator overheated before simply passing away. On the side of the road, I left it. I peered into the darkness past her. I saw no cars 5 miles back. Most likely, it's just off the road a little. Difficult to spot from the freeway. I truly need help, please. My shift at the diner in Austin begins at 6 o'clock. I'll lose my job if I'm late once more. Austin was ahead by roughly 60 miles. Reasonable request, reasonable story. Still, something didn't feel right. After more than an hour of walking on a sandy roadway, her outfit was too clean. No perspiration, no grime, and no indication of the typical wear. "I'll let my CB know about this." "Maybe," I said. "Someone else could set up a tow after seeing your car." "Don't do that, please. All I need is a lift. In any case, I cannot afford a tow truck." I paused at the urgency in her voice. She appeared nearly terrified of the thought, even though most people in her circumstance would desire all the assistance they could obtain, including expert roadside service. "Look," she added, "I know how this looks. A lone woman on the highway pleading with motorists for rides. Here, though, I'm desperate. My phone is dead. It's been ages since I've seen another car. And the first person to stop is you." She was right. If someone had been stuck here for hours, they would most likely accept assistance from anyone who could provide it. Additionally, I have previously provided rides to stranded drivers. It's a requirement of the job. "Okay," I said, "but first I must check you for weapons. Corporate policy." Her face turned white. "Weapons? I work as a waitress. Nothing is personal. You're not someone I know. I'm not someone you know. A quick pat down will enough." She took a step back from the truck. "I am unable to. Really, that's not C. Don't you simply believe me? Obviously, I'm not a threat." I was troubled by her reaction. The majority of innocent individuals are aware that basic safety measures are necessary, particularly in a circumstance like this. However, she appeared to sincere fear of being searched. I said, "Tell you what, I'll give you a ride, but you ride in the sleeper berth, not the passenger seat. And until we reach Austin, the divider remains closed." She appeared to be about to dispute before giving a short nod. All right. Anything you require to feel secure." I descended and unlocked the passenger door. The sleeper then gave birth. Without saying another thing, she ascended, and I shut the curtain between the cab and the sleeper. Simple safety measure. It would be more difficult for someone to get in touch with me from back there if they were intending to try something. The feeling that something was off persisted even after I got back on the road. Although she was keeping quiet about it, I could see light coming from the sleeping area in my mirror, as if she was moving around back there. About 10 miles later, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. The characteristic click beep of a mobile phone while taking a photo. I yelled out, "Everything okay back there?" "Fine, just settling in." However, I had heard what I had heard. She was photographing something. Perhaps my GPS, my logbook, or the interior of my truck. At that moment, I considered stopping, but we were still in the middle of nowhere. Reaching a populous place initially is preferable. It seemed like she was on the phone when I heard her speaking a few miles later, but it was too quiet for me to hear what she was saying. She said that the same phone was dead. My CB radio keyed. Breaker 119. This is Highway 50. Mile marker 102. Eastbound Desert Rose. Does anyone have a copy? Immediately a voice returned. "This is Midnight Cowboy, Desert Rose. I have a clear copy of you. I've got a passenger. Midnight Cowboy. Saw her stranded on the highway and picked her up. I only wanted to let someone know in case." "Well, in case." "Desert Rose, copy that. You desire that I tell someone?" I considered it. "Not quite yet. Simply listen to this frequency." "We will. Be careful out there." I heard the woman's voice again from the sleeper-born. She was still speaking softly, but I could now make out some of her words. "Eastbound Big Rig. It should arrive in around 1 hour." I reached for my CB phone once more. "Are you still keeping an eye on it, Midnight Cowboy?" "Change of plans, Roger. Desert Rose." Upon reaching the next exit, I will pull off. Look for a public location to drop off my passenger. Is there a problem? The door between the sleeper and the cab slipped open before I could respond. I could smell the woman's perfume as she leaned very near to me. Too near. To whom are you speaking? She inquired. Just checking in with dispatch. Company policy on the picking of passengers. That is not necessary for you to do. Before long, I'll be out of your hair. She was examining my dashboard controls, GPS display, and CB radio as if she were learning the arrangement by heart. I also took note of something else. She had stains on her hands. Her palm and fingers had dark stains that looked like grease or ink. What are you holding? I inquired. After glancing down, she swiftly drew her hands back into the sleeping space. It wasn't dirt. It was just dirt from strolling on the roadway. It appeared as though she had been working with a mechanical device that would produce such a residue. Perhaps auto parts or perhaps something else. We saw a sign that read, Austin, 25 miles. Nearly there. I could end this whole thing by dropping her off at the first public location. She said, I just remembered, actually. I don't have to travel to Austin. A truck stop is approaching. Go out 168. I can be dropped off there. I looked at my atlas. My map showed that there was no truck stop at exit 168, which was roughly 10 miles ahead. It was merely a minor detour into the desert. On my map, I don't see a truck stop. It's fresh, opened only a month ago. It's where my boyfriend works. He can drive me the remaining distance. Now every warning sign in my mind was going off. The plot was constantly shifting. The specifics keep changing. Furthermore, why would she prefer to leave at a far exit rather than travel to the town where she said she worked? I told you, let's just keep going to Austin. I'll drop you off at your workplace, the diner. You won't be late for your shift that way. No. She didn't mean for the word to sound so cutting. No. She didn't mean for the word to sound so cutting. I mean, no. It's okay at the truck stop. I don't want to get in your way, really. Austin did not obstruct my path. She appeared desperate to avoid going there, even though it was right on my route. The suggestion nearly sent me into a panic. My headlights picked up the exit 168 sign. Down the side road, there are no lights visible. No sign of business of any sort. Nothing but blackness extending into the desert. I didn't slow down when I passed the exit. Hey, she said, you missed it. I apologize. I didn't notice it in time. Next time we'll capture one. She remained silent for a while. Then I heard her pacing the sleeper once more. Her voice had shifted more forcefully when she spoke next. Less of the defenseless stranded driver persona. I really should get off at the next exit, you know. It's significant. Why? Since I have people waiting for me. Individuals who dislike being kept waiting. My skin crawled at the way she said it. The remarks of someone who merely needed a lift to work were obviously not threatening. I reached for my CB, Cowboy at midnight. Are you still keeping an eye on it, Desert Rose? Go ahead, Desert Rose, Roger. I'm coming up to Austin. I intend to make a stop at the first open area I come across. You might want to give someone a call if I don't get back to you within 30 minutes. Make a copy of that. How old are you? The woman was standing directly behind my seat before I could respond. Her movements had escaped my ears. She wasn't in my reflections. Abruptly, she appeared, near enough to put her hand on my shoulder. Silently, hang up the radio, she said. Ahead, perhaps 5 miles, I could make out Austin's lights. Inhabited region. Assistance is available. Nearly there are witnesses. Please take your seat again. We're nearly there, I commanded. Hang up the radio. There was a pressure on the nape of my neck. It wasn't difficult. I just felt enough strain to notice it. A finger might have been involved. It might have been something else. This is Desert Rose Midnight Cowboy, I said into the phone as I started to move toward Austin. Here, everything is good. There was a minor increase in pressure on my neck. You sound a touch tight, Desert Rose. Are you certain everything is all right? I wanted to refuse. Wished to advise him to contact law enforcement. Something was stroking my neck and I wanted to scream for aid, but it hadn't moved. In addition, the woman behind me was still. Yes, I'm simply exhausted. Good night. The desert cleared. I put the phone down. My neck no longer felt the pressure. As she returned to the sleeper section, she remarked, Good choice. Just before town, a rest place is now approaching. Come on in, I looked at my map. Although a rest area was marked, it was only a modest desert stop with vault toilets and picnic tables. No security, no facilities. The kind of area where you could scream and no one would hear you. I assumed you had to leave for work. Plans have changed. Some are interested in meeting you. Who are they? The type that has been monitoring your schedule, cargo, and route. You realize how predictable you are? Everything is the same, including the highways and stations. Facilitates planning in advance. Parts of my cargo machine may be worth $50,000. It's not a fortune, but if someone was desperate enough, they could kill for it. Ahead came the exit to the rest area. Dark, alone, and encircled by a desolate desert. I might not drive out again if I pulled in. I continued to drive past the exit, keeping my foot on the accelerator. She said, "I told you to pull over, and I told you we're going to town." The sign for Austin's city limits flashed by. Buildings, streetlights, and the prospect of safety are all nearby. At this hour, I could make out the glow of a gas station, most likely equipped with surveillance cameras and possibly even patrons. I could hear the woman moving once more and talking on her phone, but it was louder now and she wasn't attempting to keep it hidden. He continued, "He's going into town, all right." "No, I am unable to. There are currently too many individuals present." I pulled into the first brightly illuminated establishment. I noticed a truck stop open around the clock with numerous cameras and other cars parked outside. She was climbing out the passenger door before I had even applied the brakes. She said, "Thanks for the ride," as if nothing had occurred. I saw her leave, not in the direction of the truck stop building, but in the direction of a dark vehicle parked at the lot's edge. The vehicle had been in motion. Someone had been waiting for her since I could see emissions coming from the tailpipe. She climbed into the passenger seat, and the vehicle continued to drive until it came to the highway without using its headlights. I spent a considerable amount of time sitting there attempting to comprehend what had just transpired. On some desolate road, had she been preparing to rob me and signal accomplices to stop my truck? Or was I simply overanalyzing a string of coincidental events out of paranoia? I was never informed. However, 3 weeks later, as I was chatting with another driver at a Reno truck stop, he said something that really chilled me. About a week after my incident, he had been traveling Highway 50 through Nevada, the same path I had taken. He had noticed something that disturbed him at mile marker 95. There is no one nearby. However, there is a car parked on the shoulder with flashing hazard lights. Just a car in the middle of nowhere, abandoned. Upon reporting it to the state police, they informed him that they had received other reports regarding that vehicle in the previous month, all of which were in the same location and seemed to be abandoned. However, the car was always gone when they sent someone to look into it. The officer he spoke with said they felt it would be a deception to make the location appear to be a breakdown zone where someone might actually require assistance. The car's description was what truly struck a chord with me. A dark-colored car with Nevada license plates. It was the identical vehicle I had seen that woman enter outside Austin's truck stop. When they gave me that job, I ought to have questioned them more. Never in my 30 years of freight hauling have I seen a rate that high for such a short route. It costs $500 to transport one crate, possibly 200 meters in total, from a Detroit warehouse to a rural Michigan residence. I assumed it would be easy money. The fact that the pickup was planned for midnight ought to have been my first warning sign. The dispatcher had been adamant, but loading docks aren't typically used by genuine firms at that hour. The customer paid premium prices for the convenience of a midnight pickup, which they specifically requested. In an industrial area that has seen better days, I located the warehouse. There were no other people around. Half the buildings were deserted, and the street lights were broken. I followed the address to a plain metal building with a number written on a steel door and no company signage. In spite of the warm October night, a slender, anxious man in coveralls and work gloves was waiting for me in the loading bay. He simply indicated a wooden crate on a pallet without introducing himself. His words were, "That's it. Handle it carefully." We loaded the crate with the forklift, and although it was smaller than I had anticipated, perhaps 4 feet by 2 feet, it was quite hefty. It must have weighed at least 300 pounds, which seemed excessive for a creature of that size. "What's within?" I inquired. "Pieces of machinery, very costly, very delicate. Because of the meticulous management, the buyer is paying more." I looked at the documents he gave me, but something didn't seem right. The shipper's address was a post office box, and the rest of the information was blank. With just a rural route number for delivery, the consignee was identified as a private collector. I said, "I need more detailed shipping information. You only receive that. Privacy is important to the client. At the delivery location, you will be greeted." He was obviously wanting me gone because he was already leaving. I secured the load and set off against my better judgment. I needed the $2,500, and that was $2,500. About 20 meters north of Flint, in the midst of nothing, was the delivery address. I had previously drove through that region. It's mostly countryside with sporadic homes, the sort of area where neighbors live far apart. My GPS indicated that I would get there at 2:30 a.m. I began to notice a strange odor about an hour into the travel. Chemical and sweet, like cleaning products combined with something natural. I thought maybe diesel fumes were backing up, so I examined the ventilation in my trailer, but the smell remained. I stopped at a rest area to look around. The trailer was undoubtedly the source of the odor, which was more overpowering close to the wooden crate. I spotted something that made my stomach turn while I was walking around the load, checking the tie-downs. Moisture was leaking from the crate's bottom. A tiny puddle forms on the trailer floor, but not much more than black patches on the pallet. That cargo was leaking, whatever it was. After descending, I dialed the dispatch number. It immediately went to voicemail. I tried the pickup spot, but nobody picked up. It was just myself, a delivery address in the middle of nowhere, and an enigmatic leaking crate. I was halfway there, and I kept telling myself it was probably simply hydraulic fluid from whatever machinery was inside, but it would have been wiser to turn around. Take the cargo back to Detroit and demand explanations. I resumed driving, but the odor was growing more intense. It had gotten so nasty by the time I went off the main highway and onto the country path that I had to break the windows. Charmingly cloying with a hint of something I couldn't quite identify. I followed the GPS via progressively smaller roads, past deserted farms and dark farmhouses. Just my headlights piercing the darkness, no traffic, no streetlights. There would be no one around to hear you cry in such a remote place. It was discovered that the delivery location was a gravel driveway that led back into a wooded area. There is only a reflective sign with the route number pinned to a tree. There is no mailbox or residence in sight from the road. I nearly missed it. The road narrowed as I turned down the driveway, trees rubbing up against my trailer. I reached a clearing with a tiny house and a number of outbuildings after traveling about 4 miles. The house was dark, but I could see a car parked next to one of the sheds, a van without a rear window. In the hopes that someone would emerge to greet me, I parked and got down. Nothing. There were no sounds of life, and the home was dark. However, the documentation instructed delivery to be made to this location. Thus, someone had to be anticipating this wait. I approached and knocked on the front door. No response. The doorbell didn't seem to operate when I tried it. I heard voices behind the house just as I was ready to get back to my truck. I followed the sound and discovered 3 men standing close to the van without a window, conversing softly. When they noticed me, they halted, and one of them approached. "Are you the driver?" "Yes. Have a delivery to this address." He checked his watch. "You're ahead of schedule, just by roughly 10 minutes. Where do you want the crate?" He ignored me and continued on toward my trailer. I saw that both of the other 2 were wearing rubber gloves as they followed. That seemed odd at 2:30 in the morning. The first man said, "We'll take care of unloading. You're free to leave. To deliver, I need a signature." "No signatures. You never came here." That made my spine tingle. Signatures are usually required for legitimate deliveries, if only for insurance concerns. However, it is obvious that these men did not want this transaction to be documented. "Look, I need the right paperwork. To deliver a crate, my firm needs your company to send you here. It was provided by you." The narrative is over. My trailer had been opened, and one of the other men was looking at the wooden crate. The first man's face shifted as he said something I couldn't quite hear. "There a problem?" I inquired. "No issue. Just making sure the goods are in good shape. Stock? Not equipment, not pieces of machinery, merchandise." The man by the trailer was using his phone to take pictures, recording the box from every possible angle. I assumed he was inspecting it for damage rather than only documenting the delivery because of the way he handled it. Carefully, but not with reverence. "What's in that package exactly?" I inquired. "There is nothing to be concerned about. We'll take care of the rest. Just back your truck up to the shed." He pointed to a shed and I glanced at it. It had no windows, thick doors, and was bigger than the others. You could do anything in that kind of building and nobody would notice. I'll probably just keep it on the trailer. "It's your responsibility to unload it." "No, it's in the shed that we need." "Why?" "For that's its proper place." It was obvious from the tone of his voice that this was not a request. I realized I was outnumbered in the middle of nowhere with no cell coverage as I glanced at the 3 males who were all closely observing me. I backed up to the shed with the trailer. While the others watched, one of them drove a forklift that must have been concealed inside. They worked efficiently, just as they had in the past. The doors were closed and the container was inside the building in a matter of minutes. "It's a pleasure to do business." As he handed me an envelope, the first man spoke. "Payment in cash is agreed." I took the envelope open. 15 brand new crisp $100 banknotes. However, I had never consented to a cash payment. The corporate check was indicated on the original job sheet. "The arrangement wasn't like this. Now it is the arranging. And keep in mind that you never existed." I wanted to dispute, demand appropriate documentation, and ask why in the world this was happening. However, a windowless van in the middle of the woods at 3 in the morning, surrounded by 3 men wearing rubber gloves, was not the ideal setting for a brawl. I got into my truck and drove off, but I kept looking in my mirrors the entire way back to the main road. I had the clear impression that I was being observed, but no one followed. No matter how often I cleaned my camper, the odor persisted for days. Chemical and sweet with a hint of organic. The fragrance was eventually identified as coming from a veterinary clinic where I had previously delivered medical supplies. The formaldehyde odor. Regarding that delivery, I never heard anything further. No more paperwork, no follow-up calls, and no inquiries from my dispatcher. Aside from the $1,500 in cash I placed in 3 different accounts, it was as if the job had never been there. A few weeks later, I was at a truck stop outside of Detroit, sipping coffee with another driver. In the same industrial area, he said, he got a strange employment from a warehouse. Midnight pickup, unidentified client. Warehouse. Midnight pickup, unidentified client. High prices for a small haul. I said, "Let me guess. Very heavy, small wooden crate on its way to a rural address." He gazed at me. "How did you find out?" "Good luck. You provide it." Yes, but when I arrived at the address, the most peculiar thing occurred. The field was just empty. Nothing, no buildings, no houses. I was in the correct location, according to my GPS, but no one was present. "With the load, what did you do?" After an hour of sitting, it was returned to the warehouse. However, the location was securely locked when I arrived. "Nobody is in the area. The crate cannot be returned." He lowered his voice and leaned forward. "In order to empty it, I opened it. There are only packing materials and a few concrete blocks for support." After that chat, I gave it a lot of thought. What had been in my container if his was empty? What sort of goods need complete secrecy, latex gloves, and formaldehyde? Over the years, I've transported a lot of odd goods, but I've always wondered what I brought to that shed in the forests. And occasionally, when I'm driving through remote places late at night, I find myself searching for that windowless vehicle, that clearing, or that dirt driveway. I wonder what would happen if I did find it again, but I also hope I never do. In my 18 years of traveling, I have encountered dozens of way stations, but the one on I-40 west of Amarillo still gives me nightmares. From the roadway, it appeared to be rather typical. A typical DOT arrangement includes a modest office building, inspection bays, and scales. However, there was a serious problem with the staff that evening. It was approximately 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. I was a touch behind schedule because of weather delays while I was moving furnishings from North Carolina to Phoenix. I moved into the right lane and followed the other trucks to the scales, since the sign indicating that all commercial vehicles must stop was illuminated. It was unusual for that time of night, and I think there were about 6 rigs in front of me. We found ourselves in a line similar to that of rush hour, even though most way stations don't remain crowded after 900 p.m., though the truck in front of me had been motionless for 10 minutes or more. I reached for my CB phone. "What's the hold-up, driver in front of the blue Peterbilt?" No answer. I added my location and tried again. Nothing has changed. It was odd. Generally speaking, truckers are fast to communicate delays, particularly at way stations. 15 more minutes later, the line began to move. However, each vehicle was being guided to the inspection bays rather than the standard rapid roll over the scales and go routine. Each and every one. I've driven for 20 years and I've never witnessed a way station check every truck in a single shift. A DOT officer gestured me toward Bay 3 when it was my time. Even though he was dressed in the uniform, there was something strange about his attitude. Too concentrated, too focused, as if he had a definite goal in mind. I parked where he said to and got down with my registration and logbook. The officer came closer, but he seemed almost thrilled rather than the kind of professional demeanor you expect from most DOT employees. "Evening," he said. However, it sounded less like a greeting and more like a declaration. "Tonight we're carrying out more thorough checks. I must check out your cargo. Improved examinations? A new federal law, verifying adherence to the most recent transportation regulations. Although regulations in our field are often changing, I had never heard of any new restrictions. Still, there was an uneasy feeling about the whole incident. 2 additional officers were already waiting when he escorted me to the rear of my trailer. In addition to carrying cameras and clipboards, they were dressed in latex gloves, the kind used in hospitals rather than during standard truck inspections. "What sort of goods are you transporting?" the first officer inquired. "The cab is furnished with dining sets, couches, chairs, and lighting bills. We must examine the trailer's interior." As soon as I unlocked the rear doors, they began photographing the trailer itself, its walls, floor, and ceiling, not the cargo, as if they were recording every square inch of the interior. "Is something wrong?" I inquired. "Just the usual. How long has it taken to load this cargo?" 3 days. I picked it up on Saturday in High Point. Every word I said was being recorded by one of the officers who was taking notes. The other was searching the walls of the trailer with a portable instrument as if he were trying to find something hidden. "Between pickup and here, are there any stops?" "Just for necessary rest periods and fuel." "Why? Need to confirm the chain of custody. When you're not in your truck, who has access to it?" "No one. I don't let anyone else drive, and I keep it secured." "And while you're sleeping?" It was a surprise question. "I take a nap in the taxi. No one ever leaves the truck alone." After writing another letter, he approached the front of my truck. "The cab will also need to be inspected." "The taxi? Why?" "According to a statutory regulation, an enhanced inspection covers the complete vehicle." I had previously had the most comprehensive Level 1 inspection, but they had never examined my taxi in such detail. However, these officers were extremely systematic and appeared to have endless time. They examined every drawer and storage area during their 20-minute tour of my sleeper berth. They took pictures of my gasoline receipts, logbooks, and even personal items. My cell phone caught the attention of one of them in particular. "Would you mind if we looked at this?" "Yes, I do mind, in fact. That belongs to me personally. We will not accept it. All we have to do is make sure it's not being utilized for illicit communications." "Which communications are illegal?" "Collaborating with other drivers, exchanging details about the whereabouts of law enforcement, etc. That didn't make sense." It was not prohibited to share information regarding DOT locations. For truckers, it was commonplace. However, the officer held my phone as though he thought I would give it to him. "I would rather have my phone with me," I said. After giving me a lengthy look, he wrote another note on his clipboard. "You have that right. However, your unwillingness to cooperate will need to be documented." "What is the refusal to collaborate with?" "You haven't made it clear what you're searching for." Rather than respond, he went to speak with the other cops. Silently, they were conversing, looking from time to time at me. A few minutes later, one of them came over carrying a tiny gadget that I had never seen before. He said, "We need to get some readings out of your trailer." "What sort of readings?" "Study of chemical residues to ensure that nothing dangerous has been shipped." He watched a tiny display screen as he moved the device along the inside walls of my trailer. It beeped every few seconds and he would write something on his clipboard. Everything was taking far too long. Upon surveying the area, I saw that none of the other trucks that had undergone inspection were heading out. Each of them was parked in a different spot. There are drivers standing about, looking anxious and perplexed. "How much longer is this going to take?" I inquired. "That depends on what we discover. Maybe a couple more minutes, perhaps a couple more hours." "Hour?" "I have a deadline for delivery. Following federal regulations is more crucial than your schedule." I approached the other truckers who were waiting and started talking to a man who was transporting steel. "Coils. You've been here for how long?" I inquired. "Nearly 2 hours. They searched my truck as if they were searching for hidden gold. Discover anything?" The strange thing is that they won't let me go, even though they didn't seem to discover anything wrong, repeatedly stating that they need to check with their supervisor on something. We were heard by another driver. The same is true here. 3 hours and counting. They took pictures of everything. Samples were taken from my trailer. Even inquired about my 6-month-old route history. Samples. Cleared debris off the walls of the trailer. Gathered a residue of some sort from the floor. Claimed it was for analysis of chemicals. I glanced at the other motorists. We're all transporting various kinds of goods, each with a distinct origin, everybody traveling to several locations. This path through Texas was all we had in common. And cop came over to our group. "Drivers, please give us specific details about the origins of your cargo, the people who loaded your trucks, the warehouses you picked up from, and the routes you traveled during the previous month." "Why?" the steel coil driver inquired. "We are looking into any security lapses in the network of commercial transportation. It is necessary to track any potential sources of contamination. What is the contamination? Sources of contamination. What is the contamination? To protect public safety, we require your assistance, but that is classified information. That phrase, sensitive information, crossed my mind. Classified concerns are often not handled by DOT officers. That is more the domain of Homeland Security or the FBI. Can I see some identification? I inquired. After hesitating, the officer presented me with a badge. It appeared quite professional, yet there was something strange about it. His face was not exactly in the picture, and the badge number was partially hidden. Are you really doing? I pushed. On this multi-agency task force investigation, we are collaborating with DOT. My question was not addressed by that. I glanced around and saw that no normal way station employees were in sight. Just these 3 cops with their gadgets and clipboards. I said, I think I'd like to call my dispatcher. There isn't much phone service here. It might not get through. I looked at my phone. Good signal, full bars. He was telling lies. I made my way back to my truck with the intention of calling not only my dispatcher, but also the state police. However, one of the officers showed up next to me as I went for the door handle. Where are you heading? To call someone on the phone. If you stuck with the other drivers, that would be better. For reasons of security. For the sake of security. All drivers must remain in one place while the investigation is underway. It dawned on me then that we were not being examined. People who might not even be actual law enforcement officials were holding us. I'd like to go. That's not feasible at this time, I said. The inquiry of your truck is still ongoing. What is being investigated? Although I am unable to go into specifics, I can inform you that a number of trucks that fit your route description have been marked for possible security infractions. What violations? Suspicious conversations, unreported stops, and unauthorized cargo. Before it can proceed, each car must be cleared. That was all illogical. I had all the paperwork for my shipment. I had no suspicious conversations with anyone, and all of my stops were recorded. I checked my watch. 1:30 a.m. After more than 2 hours, I began to suspect that these weren't even standard inspections. I was holding the other trucks in the parking lot when I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Now, there were twice as many cars as there had been when I had first arrived, but no new trucks had entered. What was the source of all these extra cars? I noticed they weren't all commercial trucks when I went to have a closer look. The same cops appeared to be inspecting a number of vehicles, including pickup trucks, vans, and even a few cars with out-of-state license plates. I noticed one of the pickup drivers and approached him. He questioned, "You've been here long?" 2 hours. You have 4 hours. No one will tell me what they're waiting for, but they keep repeating they're waiting for clearance. What are you transporting? Nothing. Even though I'm only traveling cross-country to California, they demand that my truck must be examined. It dawned on me then, DOT inspections were not what these were. Both private and business vehicles were being stopped. However, why? And who exactly were these individuals? I had enough, I determined. I began to move in the direction of the out, but I was stopped by one of the officers. I want you to go back to the waiting room, sir. Am I being arrested? No, but I'm heading out after that. He took hold of my arm as I was walking toward my pickup. You can't do that, can you? By what authority? He simply tightened his hold without responding. I realized then that they were not really law enforcement personnel. By now, real police would have either arrested me or released me. They wouldn't engage in this vague form of confinement. I withdrew and continued to walk. He didn't try to stop me again, but he followed. Perhaps because other motorists were observing. Perhaps because he knew his secret was out. After getting inside my truck, I turned on the engine. The officers were speaking urgently into radios, as I could see in my mirrors. But no one attempted to physically obstruct my exit. I expected to be chased by actual police at any moment, so I drove as fast as I could legally leave that way station, but no one followed. I simply vanished into the night, abandoning whatever bizarre activity was going on at that fictitious inspection post. When investigators visited the scene 2 days after I reported the event to my employer and the Texas Department of Transportation, they discovered that regular staff was working there. There was no multi-agency task force, no record of any intensified inspections, and no police who fit the specifications I gave. There were no commercial cars processed between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., according to the way station staff, who stated that they had been closed for repairs that Tuesday night. I was never there, according to the official record. However, I still have the pictures I took while I waited on my phone. Images of my pickup, the other cars, and those officers wearing rubber gloves and clipboards. proof that something did occur that evening, even if no one wants to admit what it was. When my engine made that noise near Flagstaff, I should have carried on going, but I was transporting medications that were sensitive to temperature and couldn't afford to break down in the Arizona desert. I picked the exit when the GPS indicated a vehicle repair shop only 5 miles off I-40. With a few trucks parked outside and a sizable metal structure housing multiple service bays, Desert Diesel Repair appeared to be a real business. However, as I saw something strange when I pulled into the lot, I didn't see any mechanics at work or indications of an operational repair business, even though there were trucks parked there. The late 50s mechanic, with the weathered face of someone who had worked outdoors for decades, came out of a service bay wearing coveralls. After listening to my engine, he identified a failed main bearing right away. His words were, "Bad news. If you keep driving, the entire engine will be destroyed. But in a day or two I can get it operating like new again." Labor and parts might cost about $3,500. I was unable to move. Driving with a failing bearing was not a risk. I couldn't risk losing my chilled load. "How did you find out that my trailer contained medications?" I mentioned my medicine baggage and inquired. He hesitated. "You mentioned medication that must be refrigerated." However, I had mentioned medicine rather than pharmaceuticals in particular. It was a minor thing, yet it stayed with me. He maneuvered my truck into the bay, parking it behind a loading dock I hadn't spotted near the back of the building. Although he was inspecting my reefer unit, seemingly searching for something special as he looked at the cargo door lock and temperature settings. The other vehicles that were parked around the site weren't empty, I noted. According to the mechanic, some of them were customers, but they all had refrigerated trailers attached, functioning and maintaining temperature as if they were transporting perishable goods. There were other salvage projects. "Where are the drivers?" I inquired. "While we work, most get rides to town. Around 20 meters east is the Greyhound station. However, upon approaching one truck to inspect it, I noticed personal belongings on the dashboard. An open logbook and a CB radio, as if the driver had just stepped out. It also felt wrong in the office. Too orderly and spotless for a truck maintenance facility. No coffee-stained paperwork, no parts catalogs, and walls with calendars that seemed like new. He moved in front of me as I made the decision to depart and attempt to reach Phoenix. "You can't do that. Too risky with a deteriorating bearing. I own that truck. My choice. We are responsible if we allow a car with mechanical issues to leave our facility in a dangerous state. Rules governing insurance." It was absurd. However, he was in my way. I took another look around the grounds. All of those vehicles with operating refrigerated trailers that seemed to have been left behind by their drivers. Despite having full bars 30 minutes prior, my dispatcher said there was no cell service when I attempted to call him. It was also said that the telephone was down. Something I discovered while exploring the building made my stomach turn. A stack of state-specific license plates, some of them twisted and broken as if they had been taken by force. "Those are old plates from salvage vehicles," said he. When he saw me looking, he explained. "Where are the cars?" "Mostly sold for parts. However, why were there so many fully functional rigs with operational reefer units parked throughout the property if the trucks had been scrapped?" I said, "I want my truck back. It cannot be released in a dangerous state." He approached my truck and maneuvered it past thick doors I hadn't noticed, farther into the building. Locks engaged and the doors closed behind it. "If all goes as planned," he said with a chilly smile, "your truck will be ready in a day or two." I didn't care about anything but getting away as I rushed toward the highway in the 110-degree heat. I had to travel 2 hours to get to the freeway before I was picked up by a state policeman. The buildings were still there when he drove me back, as I had instructed, but they appeared to have been deserted, rusting, and unoccupied for many years. No recent activity, no vehicles, and no equipment. There was no sign of my truck. The trooper ran plates from other trucks that I had committed to memory. All 3 were transporting refrigerated cargo and had been reported stolen within the last 6 months. My truck was never returned to me. However, I learned 6 months later that a medical research institution had been closed due to unapproved trials. The institution was housed in what appeared to be a fairly recognizable building in an industrial area outside of Birmingham. The article claims that investigators discovered evidence of missing study subjects and unlawful clinical studies. For months, the plant had been run by contractors who might not have fully understood the operation. Although I still drive freight, I'm pickier about the cargoes I take on. Occasionally, I ponder those containers and wonder if some of the individuals who enrolled in experimental therapies in Birmingham, ever returned home, or if they were taken to locations where no one would inquire about what transpired when things went wrong. Maria, the dispatcher I had been working with for 3 years, vanished. She was checking in twice a day and routing my loads one day. Her call sign was being used by someone else the following day who was obviously not Maria. Car parts were being transported from Detroit to Dallas on Monday morning. If I hadn't spoken to Maria nearly daily for years, I might not have noticed the difference in the voice that replied. Big Dog is checking out of Detroit right now. Over. Big Dog, copy that. It's Maria here. I hope you travel safely. Incorrect cadence. Too formal. Actual Maria frequently made remarks about the weather and always referred to me as Danny. It sounded as though this individual was reading from a script. Are you feeling all right, Maria? You sound different. You're simply exhausted. When you arrive in Indianapolis, check in. Over. Danny, she signed off without the customary drive safe. That was the conclusion of all the talks at Indianapolis. The same voice, the same too formal tone. She provided me the incorrect delivery window information, 8 NAS AM instead of 6 NAS AM, and neglected to ask for my ETA, which Maria normally did. Maria expressly stated that I put her to the test last week by asking a fictitious query concerning damaged freight in Memphis. The real Maria would have said she had no idea what I was talking about right away. Which client? After a long pause, the bewildered response came. Louisville's construction was worse than anticipated. Maria had offered me a different route and warned me about it. This I was late, but the person didn't care or didn't know. She just replied, "Continue as planned," when I called to report the delay. No frustration, no inquiries regarding the route. Maria had strong feelings about everything and never let drivers make routing decisions. I attempted to use my sleeper to contact Maria's direct extension. I had been phoning her phone for 3 years, but it was a generic corporate voicemail, not hers. As I got closer to Dallas the following morning, my phone rang. The name of my company is displayed, but the number is unknown. It's Maria here, Danny. I'm glad I got through to you. She was the one. The actual Maria sounded anxious. Where have you been, Maria? Your call sign has been used by someone. I've missed 4 days due to illness. Food poisoning. Been in the hospital. Someone has been accessing dispatch using my login credentials since I recently returned. Who? We're not sure. Danny, the system says you shouldn't be traveling to Dallas. Yesterday, your load was diverted to a Louisiana warehouse. In the middle of nothing, the kind of remote location where trucks may vanish, she read off an address. Avoid going there, she advised. Someone has been rerouting loads, altering paths, and pretending to be me. The Dallas receiver told me over the phone when she called back that they had canceled the load the previous week. However, neither Maria nor I ever gave them a call. Maria added, "There's more." The experiences of 3 additional drivers were comparable. Unusual dispatch calls and route modifications that don't match records. 6 days earlier, Jimmy Santos complied with rerouting instructions to a warehouse in Arkansas. Since then, no one has heard from him. Do you believe your drivers are being targeted? Someone has been researching our business, picking up practices, and finding out how to take advantage of the system. They are aware of which drivers have faith in dispatchers and blindly obey orders. In what way did they obtain your login? Those login credentials are highly secured. Either they have access to information they shouldn't have, or someone hacked from within. She advised me to stop making dispatch calls and provided me with an emergency contact. The receiver insisted they had canceled, citing phone logs of calls to Maria on the cancellation, even though I arrived in Dallas safely. There had been another participant, someone knowledgeable enough to pose as several individuals in the shipping chain. 3 weeks later, 50 miles from the fictitious delivery destination, Jimmy Santos's truck was discovered abandoned in a gully in Arkansas. No cargo, no Jimmy, no justification. Upon conducting an investigation, the business discovered no indications of hacking, no records of unlawful access, and no means of identifying the fraudulent dispatcher using Maria's login credentials. I no longer trust dispatch calls, but I continue to drive the same routes. Each voice must be confirmed. All instructions were double-checked. Every change of route is questioned, because someone is still observing, learning, and coming up with new ways to make trucks and drivers vanish out there. Knowing that it might occur again tomorrow is the worst part. Directions to a destination you'll never return from, given by a familiar voice on the radio posing as someone you trust. Whether you'll spot the scam before it's too late is the only issue. Late is the only issue. After 7 years of driving the same route between Atlanta and Jacksonville, I believed I knew every rest stop. However, I discovered one I had never seen before on that October Tuesday night. Due to construction delays outside of Mon, I was running behind time at around midnight. 5 miles away, my GPS indicated a rest place. However, there was nothing there when I arrived. Until I noticed lights ahead, I continued to drive. Warmer, gentler illumination instead of glaring fluorescent. There was a sign, Truckers Welcome, Peachtree Rest Area. Georgia has lots of facilities that don't usually appear on GPS, but I had never heard of it. For after midnight, the rest area was surprisingly crowded. Several automobiles, maybe 20 trucks parked in tidy rows, and people moving about as if it were midday. As I was checking my tourist attire, a man wearing khakis and a polo shirt came up to me. Not normal for a trucker's post-midnight rest place. "Is this your first visit?" he inquired. Yes, I was unaware of this location. The majority don't. Really calm, really soothing. An ideal location for rest. His emphasis on rest, as if it meant more than just sleep, was unnerving. The scent of funeral homes permeated the air, pleasant and flowery. Although the visitor center offered a coffee bar, a gift store, and cozy seats, the employees behind the counter all had the same serene, dreamy looks. The woman at the coffee bar offered, "Would you like something to help you relax?" The coffee tasted great, but I couldn't place the herbal aftertaste. That's our unique combination. Very soothing, using local ingredients. Most guests discover that it improves their quality of sleep. I took a look around. The other individuals, including truck drivers, families, and elderly couples, shared the staff's laid-back, vacuous looks. There were no phone calls, no complaints about traffic, no conversation. Some people are just sitting peacefully and gazing off into space. You ought to think about spending the night. For drivers who require longer rest intervals, we have facilities. Prolonged periods of inactivity. Some folks discover that they require far more than the typical break. As I made my way back to my truck, I observed that the other drivers were not engaging in their customary break activities, calling dispatch and inspecting the equipment. They were simply loitering, still wearing that serene, empty expression. One was leaning on a Freightliner when I got close to it. "How are things going?" His eyes were hazy and unfocused as he turned. "Everything is going well. This place is quite calm, incredibly peaceful. You've been stopped for how long?" "I'm not sure." "Here, time seems to be of little importance. Simply take a nap, just tranquility. Are you going to resume driving soon?" "Finally, when I'm prepared." "When they declare me prepared." I looked at other trucks. One had 3 weeks' worth of logbook entries. Peachtree Rest Area for 21 days in a row. No driver remains at a take a 3-week break. Another displayed months' worth of entries at the same spot. I noticed that my hands were shaking and that I was feeling remarkably at ease. Something about the coffee was impairing my judgment. I rushed over to my truck and turned on the ignition. However, the khaki-clad man knocked on my window. "Going so quickly? You seem worn out." "Driving after not getting enough sleep could be risky." "I'm all right. For fatigued drivers, the roads can be hazardous. It's sometimes preferable to remain in a secure location until you've fully recovered." His use of the word recovered gave the impression that I was ill. There was something predatory in his calm expression now. When I pulled away, I noticed a staff member at the windows observing my departure as I passed the visitor center. Predatory, but still cheerful and calm. I couldn't see the entrance ramp when I checked my mirrors for it. No lights, no signs, as if it had disappeared. Another driver reported missing time on a recent run a week later, falling behind by hours and losing track of where he had stopped. I recall having coffee in a rest place and feeling really unwinding. The next thing I knew, I was back on the highway, but my logbook indicated that I had been stopped for 6 hours. I can only recall half an hour. This was where. The strange thing is that somewhere between Jacksonville and Mon. However, I couldn't find it when I looked for it again. Since then, I've traveled that path numerous times, constantly keeping an eye out for evidence of peach trees. I occasionally believe I see familiar lights in the distance when I'm exhausted late at night. Comforting, cozy lights that promise tranquility and repose. But because I can't stop thinking about those logbooks, those drivers who had been there for weeks, and the way the personnel grinned when they mentioned long rest times, I always drive by them. I consider the fate of drivers who remain too long, who consume excessive amounts of that unique coffee, and who allow themselves to become lost in that serene, empty state. Are they ever gone? Are they even interested in doing so? And occasionally, when I'm quite exhausted and that lovely flowery scent permeates my vents, I question if I'll be able to continue driving by those lights, or if I'll give up one night. Lights, or if I'll give up one night. When they offered me to join their convoy, I should have realized something was amiss. After 26 years of driving alone, I had never been asked to run across 3 states with a group of truckers I hardly knew. However, the cost of petrol was killing me, and they said that group purchases at particular stations would result in cheaper discounts. A truck stop outside of Little Rock was the starting point. 3 drivers came to my table while I was getting food. They claimed they had seen my truck and wanted to invite me to join their efficiency club. They identified themselves as Mike, Steve, and Carlos. They described it as though it were a valid business deal, arranged routes, pulled gasoline purchases, and shared details regarding road conditions and traffic. "Twice a month we go for a run together," Mike explained. Being in his mid-50s and exuding the confidence that comes with decades of travel, he was the clear leader. The same path every time. Denver to Little Rock. Look out for one another. Distribute resources. Create a better time than going it alone. What is the number of trucks in your group? The run will determine this. This evening we've 12, including you. All professional and experienced drivers if you're interested. The monetary rewards were alluring. Group prices at truck stops, shared tolls, and fuel discounts. It sounded too fantastic to ignore in a field where every dollar counts. What's the catch? No catch. Simply adhere to the convoy's procedures. Maintain radio communication, stay in formation, stop where the group stops, and do other fundamental coordination tasks. On a tablet, they displayed a comprehensive spreadsheet with a route plan that included food times, rest periods, and fuel stops. Extremely professional and well organized. The sort of preparation that may result in significant cost savings on a lengthy haul. Okay, I'm on board. Fantastic. At precisely 6 a.m., we roll. For convoy communications, use Channel 15. Everything will go smoothly if you follow my lead truck and keep the appropriate distance. In my sleeper that night, I was pleased with my choice. The cost reductions might have a significant impact, and running in a group would be a pleasant alternative to driving alone. The following morning, we gathered in the parking lot of the truck stop. 12 large rigs with skilled drivers and excellent maintenance. Mike's vehicle led the way. The others were dispersed behind mine, which was fourth in line. Extremely well organized and professional. The initial hours proceeded according to plan. Excellent radio communication, constant tempo, and no issues. Mike would warn of impending road conditions. Drivers would verify where they were. Everything is according to the text. The group discount was valid, and the gasoline stop outside Fort Smith was located precisely as the timetable indicated. However, as we entered Oklahoma, I began to see several things that disturbed me. The first was the official convoy communications radio chatter. On the same channel, I was picking up tidbits of other discussions. Code-based quiet conversations between drivers' words I failed to recognize. Keep the package safe. The path is obvious. Timeline verified. Not your typical trucker discussing the weather and traffic. Our path came in second. The plan called for us to avoid traffic and construction by using secondary routes rather than interstates. However, the construction delays were quite foreseeable, and some of these routes were adding a lot of kilometers. Better routes would be known by any seasoned motorist. The behavior at stops came in third. Unlike other truckers, the other drivers did not disperse to rest, eat, and fuel when we parked into a truck stop outside of Tulsa. As if they were security officers rather than drivers, they remained together, conversing in small groups and continuously observing the other patrons. Everything okay? During the gasoline stop, I asked Mike, "Yes, but why? For a routine run, it just feels like you guys are more vigilant than normal." These days, one cannot be overly cautious. There are several thefts and cargo security issues. We look out for one another. It made sense. I was troubled by the way he phrased it, though, as if they were more concerned with something specific than random stealing. "What sort of goods are you transporting?" I inquired. "Electronics, primarily computer equipment." "You don't have any very valuable furniture." He nodded, but I saw him and Steve looking at each other, as if my stuff had any bearing on their plans. I resumed my focus to the other trucks in our convoy after we were back on the road. They were all modified in the same way. The kind of improvements you might anticipate from drivers who frequently traveled through hazardous terrain or transported valuable cargo include additional antennas, tinted glass, and reinforced bumpers. However, upon closer inspection, I saw that some of the trailers were riding low, as if they were completely laden. However, a number of drivers have brought up deadheading to Denver or carrying half cargoes. Their stories did not align with the weight distribution. Mike requested an unplanned stop at a tiny truck stop that I had never heard of at around midday. It's a single building operation in the middle of nowhere, close to a grain elevator, and not on any main route. "Why are we stopping here?" On the radio, I inquired. "Check the equipment and refuel. Normative practice. But we just fueled 3 hours ago, and this place looked like it hadn't seen major traffic in years." I saw that there were only our 12 trucks and a few staff members who appeared to be anticipating us when we drew in, and no other patrons. As if he recognized us, the fuel island attendant went directly to Mike's pickup. Direct business discussion, as if this were a scheduled meeting rather than an impromptu fuel stop, without any informal greetings or checking which pump to use. While the others exited to inspect the equipment, I remained in my taxi. However, they were conversing quietly with the truck stop staff rather than checking their trucks. Money was exchanged. Everyone kept checking their watches as if they were on a strict schedule, and small packages were traded. "Are you coming in for coffee, big dog?" Steve made a radio call. "I'm doing fine. Want to schedule a time to meet up?" For the route briefing, Mike wants everyone inside. Briefing on the route. 11 additional drivers were approaching the building, even though we had already received comprehensive drawings. So I descended and trailed behind. The interior of the truck stop seemed peculiar. It's clean and well-stocked, but our group is the only people there. Every staff appeared to be fully aware of our identity and our needs. The coffee was ready. The counter had sandwiches ready. There were even clean towels ready in the restrooms. They seemed to have anticipated our arrival. I told Carlos, "This stop has been in use for many years. Regular consumers are well cared for." However, this was more than just customer service. Instead than feeling like a random halt, it felt like a planned rendezvous. Additionally, the cashier declined my attempt to pay for my coffee. "Already taken care of," he stated without stating the source of the payment or the reason. Mike handed out schedules and maps on a table in the back corner and gathered us around it. "The route has changed, but we're still moving at a fair pace. We're taking Highway 412 rather than the scheduled route because the construction ahead is worse than anticipated." He used his tablet to show us the new route. It would put us on roads with intermittent cell service and little other traffic, taking us through even more isolated areas and prolonging the journey by at least 2 hours. "We're going to be well behind schedule because of this," I remarked. "We will compensate for the time. I promise you that this is the preferable course of action." I surveyed the table. The other drivers didn't appear to be worried about the change in route or the delay. They actually appeared relieved, as if this had always been the plan. "In fact," I remarked, "I guess I'm going to split off here. Travel to Denver on my own. My delivery schedule does not allow for this diversion." There was silence in the room. Mike put down his coffee cup and gave me a look I had never seen him make before. Very serious, but not quite angry. "Partner, I can't allow you to do that. To ensure our safety, we run together. Everyone is at risk when they split up." "What is at risk?" "Theft, hijacking, and other issues. Driving alone on these routes might be risky. For 26 years I had traveled alone, even over some really hazardous terrain. However, these were rural highways in Oklahoma, not the domain of urban gangs. I'm going to risk it." Steve said, "I firmly believe you should remain with the group. For your personal security." It was obvious from the tone of his voice that this was not a recommendation. It was a directive. A recommendation. It was a directive. Suddenly I became aware that I might not even be a member of a valid efficiency group. I took another glance around the truck stop. Although the workers continued to observe us, they now appeared to be more guards than customer service representatives. My truck was in the center of the convoy, obstructed by cars in front and behind, and the parking area was set up so that our trucks were encircled by buildings, making it difficult to depart swiftly. "Pardon me," I replied as I got to my feet. "I need to use the restroom." I made my way to the exit rather than the bathroom. I wanted to return to my vehicle, inspect my load, and possibly give my dispatcher a call. However, one of the truck stop workers moved in front of me as I got to the door. "All right, sir. I'm just returning to my pickup." Mike requested that everyone remain indoors until the conclusion of the briefing. "I'll be right back." "I'm sorry, but you can't do that." I turned to face the other drivers seated at the table. Now that they were all observing me, Mike was speaking softly into a radio. It's a tiny handheld gadget rather than the CB radio that truckers often use. It dawned on me then that I was not in a convoy at all. I was involved in something quite different, something that needed drivers who couldn't leave when they wanted to, isolated routes and planned stops. I considered the goods I was transporting. Furnishings, nothing noteworthy nor worth stealing. What if, however, it had nothing to do with my cargo? What if it had to do with my identification, my truck, or my route? What if they need drivers who were law-abiding and had spotless records to cover whatever they were actually doing? I replied as I made my way back to the table that I had changed my mind about Denver. Instead, I think I'll go back to Little Rock. Mike's smile fell short of his eyes. Partner, it's too late for that. Now we're all committed. In addition, you made a contract. The previous evening I had signed something, but I thought it was merely a contract for the purchase of fuel. I now questioned what I had truly consented to. Please show me that documentation once more. Keep it away from me. But when we get to Denver, you'll get your portion, so don't worry. What do you share? I had assumed that we were only splitting the expense of petrol, but the way he phrased it implied that there was much more at stake. I took a seat again, but I was already making plans to get out. I didn't want to be involved in whatever this gang was actually doing, and the longer I stayed, the more difficult it would be to go out. After 20 minutes, Mike declared that it was ready to resume driving. I saw the truck stop workers staring from the windows as we made our way to our trucks. They seemed to be watching, not only observing, as if they were ensuring that we all departed on schedule. After getting into my cab, I turned on the engine, but I turned toward the exit rather than forming a convoy. The other drivers were scurrying around, speaking urgently into their radios, as I could see in my mirrors. Over Channel 15, Mike's voice cracked. You're headed in the wrong direction, Big Dog. I had second thoughts about Denver. I appreciate your company. Big Dog went back into formation. It's an order. An order is a directive from someone who expects to be followed, not a request from another truck driver. I turned off the CB and drove toward the interstate, stepping on the throttle more forcefully than I had ever done. I could see the convoy gathering behind me in my mirrors, following rather than dispersing to pursue their own paths. Like a pack seeking prey, all 12 trucks moved together as a single entity. I never learned what they were actually moving or what part I was meant to play in their scheme. However, I read a news report 3 weeks later about a multi-state smuggling conspiracy that concealed its operations by using law-abiding drivers. Authorities had recovered millions of dollars worth of contraband, arrested scores of drivers, and raided multiple truck stops. They explicitly mentioned the truck stop where we had received our route briefing. The study said that it had served as a hub for the coordination of illicit shipments, using drivers who were hired to give the shipments legitimacy and cover. Carlos, Steve, and Mike never got back to me, but occasionally, in my mirrors, I see convoys of trucks racing in unison, keeping formation, and coordinating their motions as if they were a part of something more than simple transportation on deserted highways in the middle of the night. And I'm always curious about how many of those drivers are knowledgeable about what they're actually transporting and how many are merely following along, believing they've joined an efficiency club when they've joined something far riskier. What I might have been carrying that day isn't the terrifying thing. It involves considering how simple it would have been to join their business without ever noticing. How many motorists believe they are only saving money on gas when, in reality, they are offering protection for illegal activity? I occasionally question whether I should have stayed to find out more about what they were doing. However, I recall how those staff members watched us go, and how Mike's tone altered as I attempted to disengage from the group. Efficiency and safety are not the main concerns of all convoys. They deal with something far more sinister. Additionally, leaving them becomes much more difficult than simply finding another way out if you're a part of them. Other way out if you're a part of them. When they gave me that job, I ought to have questioned them more. A single carton costs $1,500 to transport from a Detroit warehouse to a rural area of Michigan. $200 in total, perhaps. Simple money. Or so I believed. The pickup was planned to take place in a warehouse in an industrial area at midnight. There were no other people around. Half the buildings were deserted and the streetlights were broken. Waiting with a wooden crate on a pallet was a scrawny, anxious man in coveralls. Handle it carefully, he instructed. Machinery parts. Very delicate, very expensive. Despite being smaller than anticipated, the package was unexpectedly weighty. At least $300. Only a P.O. box for the shipper and a private collector for consignee were included in the otherwise blank papers. I said, I need more detailed shipping information. You only receive that. Privacy is important to the client. At the delivery location, you will be greeted. I began to notice a strange odor about an hour into the travel. Chemical and sweet, like cleaning products combined with something natural. There was wetness leaking from the bottom, creating a tiny puddle on the trailer floor, and the scent was unmistakably emanating from the trailer, especially close to the wooden crate. The delivery address was 20 meters north of Flint, in the middle of nothing. I found a gravel driveway that led into forests after following the GPS along progressively narrower roads. I arrived in a clearing after 4 miles. Includes multiple outbuildings and a modest dwelling. The home was dark, but I could make out a van with no windows parked next to one of the sheds. 3 men spoke softly as they came out from behind the house. When they noticed me, they halted and one approached. "Are you the driver?" "Yes, a delivery was made to this address." He checked his watch. "You're ahead of schedule. Just 10 minutes. Where are you? Do you want the crate?" Rather than respond, he strolled over to my trailer. At 2:30 in the morning, I saw that the other 2 were wearing latex gloves. He said, "We'll handle the unloading. You are free to leave. For delivery, I require a signature." "Not a single signature. You never showed up." Signatures are normally required for legitimate delivery, but these guys didn't want this transaction to be documented. The wooden crate was being examined by one worker who was using his phone, recording everything, as if he wasn't simply recording delivery, but also inspecting for damage. "What's in that package exactly?" I inquired. "There is nothing to be concerned about. Simply back up to the shed with your pickup." I turned to face the shed. "No windows, sturdy doors, and larger than the rest. You could do anything in that kind of building and nobody would notice. I'll probably just keep it on the trailer." "No, it's in the shed that we need." "Why? For that's its proper place." It was obvious from the tone of his voice that this was not a request. In a remote area without mobile service, I was outnumbered. I retreated toward the shed. After moving the cargo inside in a matter of minutes using a concealed forklift, they shut the doors. "Please doing business," he replied, passing me a cash envelope. "And remember, you were never here." For days, the odor persisted in my trailer. Chemical and sweet with a hint of organic. Formaldehyde was finally recognizable to me, as if I had previously brought medical supplies to a veterinary clinic. Another driver remembered picking up an odd midnight gig from the same industrial sector while we were having coffee a few weeks later. "Premium rates for anonymous customers in a little wooden container. Really hefty heading to a rural address, I suppose," I said. He gazed at me. "How did you find out?" "Good luck. You provide it." "It's the strangest thing. It was just an empty field when I arrived at the address. Nothing, no buildings. I returned it to the warehouse as a result. However, it was securely locked." He bent over. I opened it then. Empty. Just concrete blocks for weight and packing material. I gave that exchange a lot of thinking. What had been in my container if his was empty? What sort of does merchandise need complete secrecy, latex gloves, and formaldehyde? A news article about a medical research institution being closed for carrying out illegal experiments caught my attention 6 months later. The snapshot showed a building that appeared extremely familiar, and the facility was located outside of Birmingham in an industrial neighborhood. The article claims that investigators discovered evidence of unregistered medical operations, unlawful clinical studies, and missing study participants who had enrolled in experimental therapies. According to the paper, the establishment has been in operation for months with contractors who might not have understood the operation's entire scope. Although I continue to drive freight, I'm more selective about the loads I take on. I also wonder sometimes in the middle of the night what I brought to that wooded shed. Above all, I consider people. People may have enrolled in experimental therapies in the hope of receiving quality medical care. Additionally, I wonder whether some of them ever returned home, or if they were transported in containers in the back of trucks, to locations where nobody would inquire about what transpired when there was no power.